What's the most overrated advice you hear in startup circles?
I hate fail fast.
Yeah. Okay. Today, I'll be interviewing CEO and co-founder of Freeplay, Ian Cairns. Freeplay is the best way to create AI products and agents together. Ian, it is so good to see you. Where are you today?
Hey, Ashley, it's good to see you. Thanks for having me on. I'm sitting in our office in Boulder, Colorado. And yes, we actually have a real office. So not working from home.
I am working from home, and it is a real office in my brains, which is why you will hear lots of New York sounds, which I hope everyone enjoys. Obviously, I know you really well. I know Freeplay really well as an early investor, but I would love to hear, in your words, your origin story and kind of why you decided to be a founder.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, I'll do the quick version. My origin story on the path to being a founder, maybe not super uncommon. I've come from the product management side. Oddly, just working on developer tools for a long time. I never worked as a professional developer. I've worked on the product side of a lot of technical products, starting way back in the day, early web development shop that turned into Mapbox, and got to work on building a couple of products there. Spent some time with the first Obama administration, like bouncing around, doing some consulting projects, helped the White House launch their first API, and then ended up at this company called GNIP that was building out all the pipes for the social media monitoring and analytics ecosystem. Back in 2012 was when I joined, and we had a very quick growth ride, got acquired by Twitter, spent 7 years there, and was there from 2014 to 2021. Worked on a lot of 0 to 1 projects there, spinning up, new product areas and lines of business, always on the revenue side, and ended up kind of coming back to my roots with the GNIP team. I was head of product at the end of my time there, led all the Twitter API work, as well as the enterprise data licensing business, which was roughly a $400 million business by the time I left. Comparison, we were $40 million ARR business when we got acquired 7 years earlier. So it's a great growth ride, good experience. I got to go join another company called Firstbase that was in the heart of the remote work explosion that happened during COVID. They launched the company 6 months before COVID. We're getting equipment to and from remote workers. They actually just got acquired. Had a great time. I was first head of product and design there and got to work closely with Chris, their CEO, building that business. And then, summer of 2020, I guess it was 2022, my old friend and collaborator, now my co-founder, Eric, we started scheming about this LLM space and everything that was happening here, and got inspired to go start a company. So that's kind of what led me to here. But yeah, I think being on the product side, launching a bunch of stuff, I'd always been interested in, the opportunity to create a company someday, and it just never felt like the right time. And suddenly the stars aligned. So that's kind of what
I like that you all were scheming and trying to think of ideas of what to build. What ultimately made you land on Freeplay? You could have built anything. You're obviously have a great experience from so many different places. Why this idea? Why this moment?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think in a lot of ways it started with Eric and I just saying hey, we know we want to work together again. We had a great decade. We both were interested in getting back into more technical products. Love Firstbase, but it was an aberration in my career, mostly working on platform type stuff. And, he was in the same boat. That summer was what's going on? If we know we want to work together, we're showing up nights and weekends. Turns out this Da Vinci model, GPT-3 was really starting to work on the API. We got inspired by that. And I think for me, I mentioned before, I never worked as a developer. I actually have an English major, oddly, for this space. So true story. But yeah, I've always loved Andre Karpathy's tweet from a couple of years ago that the hottest new programming language is English. I think that just kind of hit for me, where I was always really, getting by with just normal software engineering. But suddenly a whole new world was opened up with LLMs for me personally. I think Eric and I both just saw there's a lot of potential for how these models were going to get used. Turns out we were maybe a couple months ahead of the rest of the world agreeing. So it was a little bit of right place, the right time. But yeah, we just got personally fired up. And I think we were this is the first time in a while that we were just purely pumped about new technology. Neither of us made the jump to go work on crypto. That was kind of a whole thing, but we're heads down building. We saw this happening. We were we got to figure out something to do here because it felt like it was going to change the world.
Amazing. Okay. And so, things are changing very fast in this market, in this AI world. What's something that you believed at the very beginning when you all started thinking about this problem, and how has that changed as you've been building?
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting moment, right? Like, we were in this kind of like transition where the conversation at the time was, people starting to chat about like, hey, it feels like generative AI is about to move from kind of the research realm, the realm of like true ML work, to, the applied realm. People are going to figure out how to use these models in more compelling ways. And I think that was probably like where we spent a lot of time early on. The first things we did were just like build to learn. Let's go. We built some like RAG chat your docs app before anybody had used those words. We were trying to figure out like, what can we do with these sorts of tools? And I think expected that a lot more of the attention was going to need to go into the models themselves. We spent a lot of time like reading papers, going deep on the research. As we've progressed, we mostly work at Freeplay with production software engineering teams, people that have been building web apps, mobile apps that are weaving generative AI into their product some way. And those folks, by and large, are not spending a lot of time and attention on what's happening at the fundamental research level. They just want it to work. So, that whole like need to go understand what's actually happening at the model layer still might be a good education, but we see increasingly few people as a percentage spending time there versus trying to figure out just like, assume the API is going to do some magic. What are the practical things you have to do to make it work?
Yeah. I mean, I obsessively kind of research there just because I think it's interesting, but none of the research ties into my day to day. Like, I just like want the thing to work from the tool that I'm using.
I mean, shout out to all the labs, right? They've made this stuff incredibly digestible for everybody else.
So true. And like a lot of people have been working on this for a long time. And it's kind of nice to see them get their flowers finally. Like everything that I have friends who've been working in space for like over a decade and longer, and they're in their PhD programs, and some are professors now teaching this topic, and they're finally like, yep, I'm popular now. See, I told you this thing I'm working on actually matters. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I like reading a lot of that piece, but it doesn't matter. I'm in my day to day. So some of your earliest customers, tell me, everyone's always asking how you get the first 3 customers. And, what are some ways you went about that? And also, what were your learnings?
Yeah. I mean, early on, I think, probably took a relatively common path. We tried to be our own customer. So we were building our own generative AI application. And then we spent a lot of time, just with our network, with various friends that were building in this space, going deep on what they were building, convinced a few folks to take a flyer on us. We were working on relevant problems. So, I don't know what the alternative path is. I'm sure people take them. There's other founders that spend a lot of time just building a tool in secret and then launch it when it feels fully baked. We had customers using our software in the first 3 months, basically, of deciding what to build. So we did that motion early on.
Right. Yeah. And it's so true. A lot of founders I talk to super early do not have anyone who's ever even seen their product or touched anything in the product. And I think you very early knew that pilot customers and just to get feedback quickly were going to be super important. And I agree now, you have to have early pilot customers from almost like day one.
We talk about this, like, and shout out to these people, right? Like, there are people that I think just kind of see the future. They go build it. They're working on a multi-year horizon line, and like they're expecting the market will meet them when they're ready. We very consciously didn't think that way, right? Like, I think we've been in the mode that is, we want to help people get to the future, but we need to solve their real problems today. So like our first 90 days, we probably talked to 75 people, just pounded the pavement, did tons of customer interviews, triangulated what the problems looked like. We were feeling some of them ourselves too, so we could validate them. And then we just like dug in with the people where the problem was really ripe and they wanted a solution.
Totally. I like asking this question because I get asked this a lot, and I always have different answers depending on kind of like what I'm going through that week.
Yeah.
But we all have these people in our careers and personal lives that we've learned so much from. I'm curious, who is that for you?
It's a good question. I like the question. I'll give you one professional and one personal. On the professional side, I think, just pure like significance of change before and after was working with Eric Gunderson. I mentioned earlier, like I was on the team that became Mapbox. He hired me at his first company. I was the third employee of this company, Development Seed. We built together for 4.5 years. We launched 3 products. Eric's a nut. If he's listening to this, I think right now he's sailing somewhere in Switzerland. So he's probably not listening, but he was just so good at moving fast, telling good product stories, inspiring a team, inspiring customers, being willing to change. Like it felt like, this kind of meme about like needing to experiment quickly as a founder. Like every 6 months we were pivoting until we found something that was really working. So, and I think that he really set a bar in terms of like just speed of execution and horsepower. So he helped shape a lot of like how I think about work. And then, probably biggest impact by far, hopefully not too sappy, but just my wife, Melissa. We've been married for 20 years coming up this summer. So that's coming soon, which is crazy to say. But yeah, like some people like wait to get married until they've kind of figured themselves out. Like we got married right out of college and have figured out who we are together. So I don't think there's been any better accountability and like just push from somebody else to like just be better than, the life that we lived for all that time together. So,
oh my gosh, that's such a good perspective though, because, people are getting married later and later now. And it's like, wait and figure out who you are and then you get married. But I have a lot of friends that got married right after college, and they have a very different type of marriage than my friends who are getting married later. And it's true, they've like figured everything out together, and you can just see the different types of bond. They're both great approaches, but I love that. I like both your professional and your personal answer a lot. Jumping into something super timely, you've had a pretty big week. You just launched not only self-serve, but also announced 5.6 million in new funding. Huge, right? Like very different business model in some ways, or like a different approach to selling a product, and then also like money to do that. What's next? How do you see it changing your trajectory? What are you really focused on?
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're excited about it, first of all, and you've been part of that. So thank you for being part of that team that bet on us. Pumped to have you in the mix. And yeah, I mean, I think like trajectory doesn't change in my mind. It's about, same trajectory. How do we go faster? I think for us, there's probably like some setting that like founders set the dial to where, on the one hand, there's like the lean startup mindset, you better be embarrassed when you ship it, like, and people end up shipping like way too early. It's like a minimum product, but not a viable product. And they spend all this time like chasing. And then, there's people, I said before, they like just build forever and then like ship it when it's perfect. We got started early, but with a small group. We've been at it now in production with customers for 2 years. We have like been through multiple renewal cycles. We're at like 130% NRR for this year. People like are deeply invested in the product. They're using it. They love it. And I think we've just realized like we've been really focused on these bigger customers, enterprise customers, making sure the product works at scale. Turns out it's working great. And like we shouldn't keep it locked up. We should get it out to more and more folks. And it's been really encouraging too, because we actually did soft launch this before. We've had some people using it, just kind of like the free tier for a bit, have gotten like as encouraging positive signal from people on the free tier saying this is awesome as we have from people that are at much bigger companies. Just felt like the time was right. And yeah, we've already gotten to grow the team a bit, put the money in the bank a little while ago. And, we're just getting to go faster now.
Yeah, totally. I love what you said about minimum product versus a minimal viable product. It's so true. I've seen teams build things that I've been on teams, we just build stuff that doesn't work, but you put it out there and you see what happens, and that's just a scary way to do it. So I really like that distinction. I think something that's important when you're building for cross-functional teams, what does great collaboration actually look like in a real-world AI team using Freeplay?
Yeah, that's a good question. And for people listening that don't know Freeplay, I'll give a little bit more context, right? So, what is Freeplay? Like we're building this end-to-end platform for, we say like the goal is to help product teams ship great AI products. What's that look like to get there? We're helping people weave together early stage prompt engineering and models, setting up evals that are specific to their products, starting to like build the ML ops kind of workflow and in a generative AI context for, curating good data sets for testing and building human review workflows. And then, we tie that all together. So we have an SDK that plugs into people's applications anytime they're building like the AI summarize button in every web app that you've seen in the last couple of years, all the way through to like complex agents that are going out and getting tasks done. our customers are building those sorts of things usually for customers, right? We're not doing like the internal use cases as much as the customer facing product development. And so there's like a development team that is trying to figure out like, hey, how do we know what these systems are doing? How do we debug them? How do we make sure they're working? Setting up evals that give some sense of metrics beyond just like, is the traffic flowing? Is the quality any good? You need evals to help with that. And then to the point about cross-functional collaboration that you're making, like we built Freeplay from the beginning, very much aware of this need that we saw early on, where like the teams that were like really fired up and moving fast were getting domain experts involved from across the business who often weren't engineers, but like really knew the subject matter and could help with prompt engineering, could help with evals, could help with QA. Sometimes those are product managers. Sometimes they're getting drafted in from like customer success or some tier 3, support role where they really know the product inside and out. Sometimes they're like legit just domain experts, like fintechs that are pulling in a CPA to do this kind of work. But whatever that looks like that's the space of collaboration we're talking about, where there's an engineering team responsible to build and ship this AI product, and there's other people who don't spend their days living in an IDE writing code that are trying to figure out how to contribute. And, I think increasingly like learning pretty advanced prompt engineering skills, learning to do evals, but whatever stage they're coming at, we've built Freeplay. So like that engineering team can get started, wired in, to their application, really lightweight SDK. They get all that instrumentation to see, what's happening on an observability front. One of the things we did, I think still kind of unique in our space, and we focused on early on, was giving people the ability to manage like prompt and model config, like a feature flag. So you can like do an experiment in the playground in Freeplay, decide if it looks better, save it, push it out to code. It actually changes how your code behaves, what the product does. So like those are the basic things people are wiring through. It lets them to do this kind of like build, test, learn loop. And then on the, domain expert side, I think what we've seen in a lot of cases is like engineers are doing all that first stuff by themselves, and they're like running SQL queries and dumping data out into a spreadsheet and saying to everybody else, like, go dig through it and tell us what you think, and good luck. And, early on, I think we saw like the closer you get those things together, the better for the teams where there's that need, where like there's a non-engineering domain expert. And what it's looked like, I think in a lot of cases, there's, one like big customer we work with, they're Fortune 100 that I've, spent time with for more than a year now. And like early on, they're like, hey, like we recognize that, there's a bunch of tools for data science and ML and other tools for engineering. And there's these other tools we put together for our data labeling folks and other tools that, PMs are trying to experiment with something in a notebook. And, maybe that cycle to be able to run something in production, find an issue, decide you want to fix it, clarify, like, what do we want to fix exactly, run an experiment, like test it, roll it out, might have taken a month, because you got to have like, shipping these data sets around, waiting for people to dig into them, shipping them back to ML or engineering to like make some prompt changes, running a whole test pipeline. They're doing that kind of stuff now. It's like possible in an afternoon, right? Where, because it's all in one place, the Freeplay web app is like very much built for those domain experts to be able to work with engineers in a seamless way. You can test a prompt change, you can test it with real data, you can run your whole eval panel on it, you can decide in like A/B testing kind of way, is this better at scale across a whole breadth of customer use cases? And if it is, like hit the deploy button. It's just like a step level change in efficiency. And I think like some of the softer stuff from it is just way more people on the same page, more people with insight about how to make a better product able to contribute, and ultimately like shipping a better product as a result that's making customers happier. So I don't know, hopefully that gives you some sense of how I'd answer the question, but like for people that are new to this space, like that's the sort of collaboration we're talking about.
Yeah, I love the additional context, and to really kind of understand more specifically, you mentioned that everyone's becoming an AI team, and most do not need to spend all day learning prompt engineering or evals. Probably, yeah, most is correct. How do you balance that power and usability across skill sets?
Yeah, I mean, the power versus the usability thing is interesting. Like we have an engineer on our team who, gave us this phrase early on, but it's like, what's the principle? We should make the simple things easy and the hard things possible. So, I think I talked about before, kind of like these two parts of our product. We have our developer SDKs and APIs. We have our like web app. The web app is like intrinsically like relatively simple. It's trying to help guide people through a workflow. It's trying to give them access to see all the data that they need, but like it can only do the workflows, that we give you. And then the APIs, the SDK side, are like actually very granular, kind of atomic functionality. We expose the whole data model. None of the data is locked up. If you want to go get like some complex analysis done, developers have freedom to do that. If you want to run like a tight, AI ops process and make sure that like every change gets tested, eval panels run, you've got a red green deploy kind of paradigm and definitively gotten better, spot check the data to make sure that you agree and ship it, like that's all clean and easy, in the web app. So I don't know, we kind of have those two principles. Like we try to make sure, we've said like we designed our SDK to stay out of the way so that developers can always get done what they want.
Yeah, I really like that. And you talked a lot about customers being able to ship faster, even kind of transforming the way they're building and all of their workflows. What's one customer win that kind of really captures that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a bunch here. Like, I'll pick one of my favorites, but, we've been fortunate to work with like a couple of these names I'm just like not supposed to share, but, big decacorn fintech. And they, part of why like they're one of my favorites is like they've adopted Freeplay across a whole range of teams. They've figured out a workflow that really puts like in the right circumstances their domain experts forward at the front, and like the engineers are able to enable these other people to like really get involved in quality and iteration, and like they can kind of do the whole workflow quickly without like being blocked on each other, right? So the pattern ends up looking like, hey, prototype this idea, generally it's working, engineering gets it wired into code, it's now running in production, and like whoever has the torch as like the prompt engineering lead or that like primary domain expert is responsible for prompt iteration, and then they'll work with like a bunch of ops folks on data review and curation. And what ends up happening is like the engineering team can go like work on other problems, they can work on building the next thing, they can work on other priorities unrelated to AI for the quarter, whatever else they've got going on. Like most production teams aren't just doing prompt quality and eval work all day. And then the people that really know the domain are able to just like live in that space. There's a lot of upside for them just incrementally getting better at it. And they're able to do this whole loop where they can like see what happened in production last week, quantify it with evals that are really specific to the problem they're solving, be able to see like, okay, these are the types of issues we want to go fix. They'll go try a new model, they'll pull in Claude 3.7 or whatever is new. They'll try different prompt changes. They'll try whatever else. They'll like run like A, B, N test comparisons, benchmark it all really thoroughly, decide when they've hit a comfort bar and they're ready to like ship, and they can like immediately do that, quantify the impact for their organization, like run that up the chain to leadership and say like, hey, we made it better, here's the receipts. And like everybody's on the same page, everybody knows the outcome. And I think that's what it starts to feel like, where it's like, more people being pulled in to really just like deliver at a higher quality bar faster. So we love that one. But that's a kind of common pattern, a bunch of folks. I think it would repeat with people like, Help Scout and Postscript and Maze, who we've worked with for a while, right? Like they're all doing the same kind of flow in their AI products.
Wow. I mean, I get excited talking about go-to-market, so I could ask you like probably 1,000 more questions, but I know you don't have the time. But I'm a big fan of Vogue does this thing where they do 73 questions and they follow around a celebrity in their house, asking them really just a little bit of everything. We're not going to do 73 questions, but I'm going to.
I wish that I feel honored that I'm even being compared to Vogue.
I've been reading Vogue since I was 5, and reading is the wrong word, but like my mom was a hair dresser, like a beautician, and so they would like send all the salons to get the free magazines, and I would just like look through Vogue when I was a kid, not realizing what I was looking at, and I was like, ooh, fashion. But I love their 73 questions model. Yeah, it's not 73, but let's try and get some in with like 10 seconds or less on the answers.
Cool.
Let's see. What's one thing in your tech stack you'll never compromise on?
The first thing that came to mind is we've always had shared code ownership. I wonder if that's going to stay true with AI, but that has been like a deeply held belief.
I think it'll stay the same, but different, maybe different form. One tool or product that you wish existed but doesn't yet.
That's easy. I want something that will read my email for me and just deal with it. My inbox is a dumpster fire.
Well, I mean, I just don't respond to emails until like I get like a free 3 hours, then I'll sit down and do it. By then, like they've all solved themselves. So that's my pro tip is to just don't answer, and then it figures itself out.
Shout out to the team at Superhuman. I love that product. They're trying to solve this. I hope they're successful.
Oh, what's the latest technical problem that really frustrated you?
Just the complexity of building AI agents. I think people are pulling their hair out, trying to figure it out.
It's getting I think it's getting too complicated. First thing you built that made you feel like a real builder?
Maybe I mentioned this before, but a Drupal website where we just ran a big blog for a while. First thing where I got to really iterate on it.
Awesome. What's your unfair advantage as a founder?
I already mentioned I have an English degree. Maybe that helps with these models, but I think that's more of a joke. Probably, I think what's really mattered most, our Twitter network has been awesome. Elon fired 6,000 of our closest friends on one day. Turns out they're all over the ecosystem now.
They are, and they're building some great companies. I've got a few in the portfolio, and thanks, Elon.
Yeah, the Twitter crew is solid.
They are. How do you know when a feature is done?
I have learned it's probably not. But better to treat it like you're always iterating and not like you finish something and stop thinking about it.
Agreed. What's the most overrated advice you hear in startup circles?
I hate fail fast.
Yeah.
I think too many people decide that they've failed too quickly and just need to persevere a little more.
I think that's right. What's the most underrated advice you hear in startup circles?
Flip side of that, experiment fast. That does matter.
Yep. Worst startup idea?
I tried to launch a startup when I was 14, making business cards for local realtors.
Was that terrible at that time? That was a terrible idea.
People needed the problem solved. It wasn't a great business.
Yeah. One signal you care most about right now? People
actually adopting evals in this AI space. That's kind of the 7 friends in 10 days. They won't succeed without it.
Yep. Best acquisition channel at the earliest stages?
Our network. Already talked about that. Yep.
First concert?
There's a group on Paul Simon's Graceland album called Ladysmith Black Mambazo. I don't remember how young I was, but seeing them live.
Last concert?
August Burns Red, hardcore band. My brother-in-law's in the band.
Oh, cool. Your favorite analog hobby or activity?
Cooking for friends. We like to host.
I do not cook, so I appreciate that you're the friend that will make people food. Those are good friends. And favorite season? I've
always loved the fall. Grew up on the East Coast. It's the best.
Everyone that's East Coast loves the fall. I keep getting that answer. I mean, I love the fall, so I grew up on the East Coast. So I think that's right. Well, I really appreciate you spending so much time with me. Thank you for telling me about your journey as a founder, about Freeplay, and answering a lot of questions. I really, really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. It's good to see you, Ashley.
Yep, good to see you. Everyone, see you next time. Thanks for joining us through our Founder Cliff Notes.
Yeah, thanks for listening.